This is part 6 of my Avengers 4 fanfiction, an alternative to Marvel's Avengers Endgame. The links to the previous parts are in the description below. Now, onto the story. Thanos deflected Tony's blast and angled his sword so that Stark's own blast was about to be deflected back at him. Steve Rogers rushed up and punched Thanos' sword, allowing Stark's attack to hit Thanos, knocking him back a couple feet. Not a lot for someone the size of Thanos. The remaining Avengers remained in shock, caught between the Mad Titan and a Mandarin who could easily get back in the fight. Thanos, meanwhile, began slashing at Steve, who had to dodge it vigorously, even as Iron Man kept blasting the Titan. "Rhodes," Tony called, "can you help us?" "On it," Rhodes said, blasting off and turning his machine gun onto Thanos' face. Meanwhile, the Mandarin forged a shield over himself, and soon Nebula and Romanoff were thrown back. We cut to Asgard, with Thor walking outside with a sense of purpose, followed by Valkyrie and a couple of her soldiers, Rocket and Groot. "I'm going out to fight the Mandarin," Thor explained. "Now, if Asgard is attacked while I'm away, Valkyrie, I'm leaving you in charge of its defense." Leaning closer to her, he whispered, "Keep an eye on Serena. I don't trust her." Walking forward and keeping the group behind, Thor said, "If at any point an attack threatens to overwhelm you, do not hesitate to call me." With that, Thor lifted Stormbreaker, the Bright Frost descended, and he was gone. Back in the bunker, Thanos finally managed to smack Captain America to the side. The Mandarin used his powers to pull Iron Man towards him and punched Stark in the face. "You know, Tony," Stane said, "I was pretty upset with that when that one guy pretended to be me. However, he was controlled by a puppet master who had a lot of power with fire. I wonder if I can emulate this power." A fireball formed over the Mandarin's knuckle, but was then tackled by Nebula, allowing Iron Man to get back in the fight. But he then focused on the Mandarin rather than Thanos, who began walking towards War Machine, sword angled. Suddenly, a blast of yellow light struck Thanos, pushing back considerably and forcing him to use the Infinity Gauntlet to shield himself. When the light cleared, we could see Captain Marvel in a defensive stance. "Congratulations on your escape," Thanos grinned. "I was never trapped," Marvel retorted. "Good to know," Thanos said, as Marvel launched another blast that appeared to knock Thanos back. But then we cut to a peek close to Thanos' perspective, and we see that both the reality and space stones were glowing, a hidden black hole sucking in Marvel's attack. And then he closed his fist, and a huge blast exploded within the area, forcing everyone present to duck behind the shield. We then see storm clouds forming, and then we see the clouds are over the besieged base, causing many Ten-Ring soldiers to look up as lightning cackled around them, and then a beam of blue light descended a distance away. Thor had landed a few meters away from a large cannon, one of the cannons that were bombarding the base. Even though Ten-Ring soldiers were firing on Thor, the bullets did nothing as he swiftly dispatched many of them before moving on to his next target. Back in the bunker, the Mandarin was holding off blasts from Iron Man as Widow and Nebula tried to flank him. "The God of Thunder is here," said a frightened voice from a communication device. "He's taking out our positions." "Order your forces to retreat," Thanos said, activating the Mind and Reality Stone. We cut to space over Europe as Thanos' flagship, the Sanctuary 2, emerged from space. We then cut to Serena lying down on a bed, tossing up a cup and catching it. Suddenly, the alarms went off, distracting her from her current hobby. We then cut to Valkyrie, flanked by a couple cohorts, even as a group of both Asgard warriors and human troops who volunteered to supplement Asgard's depleted army followed them. "Rocket," Valkyrie said into her communicator. "What's going on?" "Well, Thanos' big ship, the Sanctuary 2, has been sighted in Norwegian airspace, flanked by a bunch of smaller ships and flying worms," Rocket said. "Raise the shields," Valkyrie ordered. She pressed a few buttons on the communicator. "Thor, Thanos has returned. Thor? Thor! We cut to Thor returning to one of the positions he had already visited, as he caught wind of a scuffle that had broken out since. "What's going on?" he exclaimed to a figure taking out 10 ring soldiers. "It's me," said the figure, pulling off his mask and revealing the face of Hawkeye, fighting as his new identity, Ronin. "Glad to see you're back in action," Thor said. "Romanoff recruited me," Hawkeye responded. "I work better in the shadows, so I'm focusing on terrorists you leave behind." "Very well," Thor commented. "Rocket," Valkyrie said, back in Asgard. "Activate the Stark Guardian protocol and try to get a signal to Thor." Turning to one of her soldiers, she said, "Go get Serena." High on the castle, a hidden balcony opened up and a bunch of Iron Man droids flew out, some of which went to the border of the village, and other legions went to other villages under Asgard's rule, utilizing a special technology. We briefly cut back to the Wakandan home the Avengers were residing in, as Bruce Banner, left behind, went to the screen. "Shuri, I'm ready," Banner said. "Are you sure about this, Dr. Banner?" Shuri asked. "I'm sure," Banner replied. We then cut to a firefight within the military compound, as soldiers continued to defend against an overwhelming barrage of 10 Rings militants. "Is that thunder outside?" one soldier could be heard saying. "Is it normal around here?" "No," another responded. "The God of Thunder is finally here." "Well, I'll clear a path for him," one soldier said, tossing a grenade over to the enemy. However, before he could take cover, his arm was shot off. "Oh God," exclaimed another soldier who saw that and moved over to the wounded soldier. "Stay with me," he said to the wounded soldier, patting the stump that was losing a lot of blood. Fighting continued in the background. We then cut to Valkyrie as Serena showed up. "Ready for battle?" Valkyrie asked. "Not really. Still recovering from fighting Thor," Serena admitted. "Hopefully we can stay behind the shields and you can spend a little more time getting ready," Valkyrie remarked. After a time, Serena said, "During the Battle of Wakanda, Thanos was pounding against a shield like this one." In the background, cannons could be seen firing against Leviathans. Dropships, like those who carried the Outriders outside of Wakanda, were dropping a distance away. Eventually, they resorted to using underground mine machines to get through, Serena continued. "Do we have any defense against that?" Valkyrie swore. "Do you have any tricks to block them?" "I have tricks, but I'm not sure how effective they would be," Serena hesitated. "Keep brainstorming," Valkyrie ordered. "Rocket, have the Stark Guardians dig trenches outside the shields. We have to fight on their turf." "Sounds pretty suicidal," Rocket said. "Weren't you at the Battle of Wakanda?" Valkyrie asked. "Point taken," Rocket said. "Trenches coming up." We then turned back to the bunker, where Thanos finally managed to swat Captain Marvel to the side. Approaching her, Thanos snarled, "You will not threaten my plans anymore." But before long, Captain America rushed between Marvel and Thanos. "Ah, Captain America, back in the fight." "I could do this all day," Cap shot back. "I'm actually tempted to test that out," Thanos roared as he engaged the first Avenger, eventually hammering his sword on top of Captain America's shields. It remained like that for a few seconds before Thanos attempted to punch Steve with his gauntlet arm. However, Steve remembered the Battle of Wakanda and dodged the punch, even managing to punch back at the gauntlet arm. To Cap's surprise, Thanos recoiled, clearly having been hurt by Cap's attack. Captain America quickly rushed forward to attack Thanos again. We then cut to the battle taking place across Asgard, as the Outriders were moving between the shield domes and a few Iron Man drones attempted shooting them from above. Closer to the ground, we see soldiers in trenches, with Asgardian warriors standing in front of them. The soldiers started shooting the Outriders as the enemy got closer, and the soldiers did their jobs well enough that the warriors did not have to engage them. Eventually, Thanos' army took notice as a Leviathan flew around to the fortification, and though being blasted by cannons, was able to launch a few Shatari warriors on the ground, and fighting emerged between the Chitauri and ground forces. Meanwhile, the Leviathan was finally succumbing to the cannon fire as it drifted towards the trench, but then a large blue portal opened up and swallowed the monster, just as another opened up and the same Leviathan crashed into another swarm of Outriders. Valkyrie turned to see Serena in a pose that suggested she had a hand in the portal. "Good thing I had you brainstorm." Serena said nothing as she moved towards the trench. "Hang on," Valkyrie said. "Focus your energies on the larger targets." "What about the soldiers here?" Serena said. "We'll take care of them," Valkyrie responded, "but we need you to hold off as many swarms as you can, else we'll definitely get overwhelmed." With that, Serena took off, flying far ahead of the troops and began carrying out Valkyrie's order. She sent a few swarms of Outriders into the mirror dimensions and used portals to smash Leviathans into each other or other Outriders. We moved to a scene on the Sanctuary 2 as an assembly of Chitauri were gathered, ready to be deployed for battle. A commander growled, in an alien language, saying, "Show us what's going on." A screen appeared above the assembly, showing Serena in action. "Flyers, get out there and take her out." We then see Flyers emerge from the Sanctuary 2 and head down towards the battle below. And we cut to Serena confronting a Leviathan before noticing the Flyers descending towards the battle. Serena telekinetically moved one of them into the other, but a third one managed to shoot her, causing her to begin falling down to the ground. Before she hit the ground, Serena managed to form a portal that landed her on top of a Leviathan. Getting up, Serena watched as the Flyers started to shoot down upon Asgard's defenders, and looked up at the flagship. We then cut to Thor entering the base, and we watch him go through, taking out any Ten Rings fighters in his path. Eventually, he came across the battle taking place between the Avengers and the Thanos Mandarin team-up. Surprised at the presence of Thanos, Thor readied Stormbreaker and threw the axe at the Titan. But to Thor's shock, Thanos tilted his sword, causing Stormbreaker to bounce off of it. Thor swore and quickly summoned Stormbreaker back to him. "Glad you can make it, Thor," Steve coughed. "Not sure I could do this all day." "I knew it," Thanos growled as the fight resumed. Back in Asgard, there was a bit of fighting as the cannons were drastically reducing the number of Leviathans, and the number of Outriders finally began to dwindle. Eventually, Valkyrie was able to catch her breath. "Ready for the next wave?" she asked one of her fighters. "Another one?" the fighter asked. However, a couple minutes passed, and there was no wave. There were a couple fighters here and there, but no new wave of attack. We then cut to the inside of the Sanctuary 2, as various Chitauri members started noticing various equipment on the ship behaving in a buggy way. We even arrived at a hallway where a bunch of Chitauri fighters were waiting to be deployed. They felt the hallways chill for a moment. Then Serena appeared, appearing an awful lot like her predecessor Loki. The Chitauri immediately began firing upon her as she used a shield to block their fire. She lifted the first couple aliens above her head, and when she walked past them, slashed them with a sword. She then created a portal that was able to send their shots back at them, before telekinetically yanking some of their guns away from them. In response, 4 of them drew swords of their own, and she engaged them in a bitter duel for a few seconds, before choking one and stabbing the other 3. There were plenty more Chitauri warriors waiting for her. Irritated, she lifted up a few guns and turned their weapons against them. Back in the bunker, Thanos heard a communicator he used spring to life. "Sanctuary 2 has taken extensive damage. We need to retreat." "What?" Thanos said, making a swipe that pushed Thor, Captain America, and Marvel back. "We seem to have a dangerous stowaway on board," the voice said. "Major defense systems are down, but engines remain operational. We're evacuating before our rival fleet could take advantage of our weakness." "Fine," Thanos growled. "Staying?" he roared, walking over to the Mandarin and casually flicking the Mandarin's opponents to the side. "You're coming with me." Before the Mandarin could react, Thanos teleported himself and his ally away using the Space Stone. Their absence enabled the Avengers to get up and catch their breaths. "A lot of new information to unpack," Tony commented. "I didn't think Thanos had a hand in all of this," Udo remarked. Thor eventually called Valkyrie. "Valkyrie, I just ran into Thanos. Is everything all right?" "Thor, finally," came Valkyrie's reply. "I've been trying to reach you for quite a while. We just survived an assault by Thanos' forces." Thor swore as he turned off the communicator. "Sorry, I have to go," he said, before racing Stormbreaker and departing through the Bifrost. Back on the Sanctuary 2, Thanos walked through the hallways, scored with fallen Chitauri fighters, flanked by the Mandarin. He was even more shocked when there was more carnage in his throne room. "You did a good job distracting Stark," Thanos said. "You're not disappointed that I almost lost again?" Stain asked. "I am disappointed," Thanos said. "But I would be a hypocrite if I held it against you. The Infinity Stones grant me immense power, but they don't make me invincible." Turning to Stain, he said, "If there's one thing I have no tolerance for, it's betrayal. A certain god of mischief thought he could pull one off." As Thanos said that, he used the Reality Stone to replay the scene. "He thought wrong, and I made sure he paid for his treachery. I only had 2 stones at the time. With all 6, I can be a lot more creative. Now go, rejoin your men. Tony Stark now has a window to undermine us. Our job is to make it as small as possible." After Thanos sent the Mandarin away, he activated the Space and Soul Stone, and then stood there for a moment. He then activated all 6 stones and knelt before his own throne, and suddenly a hooded figure stood before him, one whose face was gaunt, almost like a skull. "My lady, I launched a massive assault against Asgard, and yet it remains standing," Thanos said. "How is that possible?" "Thor was willing to depart Asgard because he was reunited with a powerful ally," the figure said, showing an image of Serena. "She emerged in the mists of the decimation and has trained in the mystic arts since. She also has the skills and knowledge of her predecessor," she said, having another figure emerge from the first. "Loki," Thanos gasped. "How?" "Before he died, Loki performed the blood restoration ritual," the figure said. "A ritual that has rendered Serena more powerful than he was. The personalities differ, but Loki resides within Serena." "I forgot about that ritual," Thanos said. "Perhaps Loki could once more be used to defy the Avengers," the figure suggested. "I don't know how this ritual works," Thanos said. "I don't know how to get Serena to do this." "Then perhaps my daughter can help you," the figure said as a flaming portal opened and Hela, the goddess of death, walked through. And that is where this part ends. So, what did you think about this part? Was it a little long? I know there was a lot of content in this part, and the next part will slow down a bit in terms of action. Now that Thanos is back in the narrative, as is Captain Marvel, what do you think is going to happen next? Thanos demands you leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. Also, think about subscribing to my channel so that you'll know when I upload a new video, and consider following me on Twitter.